Hello. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully good. Hopefully everybody's been good and applying themselves and doing those sort of virtuous characteristics and qualities that they obviously need to be practicing and doing on a regular basis just because that's what they're called to do. So, the last video was just about subjectiveness as to why you actually have to obey God and realistically really come into the knowledge and understanding that there's just no alternative to any of Christ's commandments. And just based off that alone, that's the real basis of you actually obeying those laws and commandments and teachings of Christ, is just because of the fact that, we're all called to judge these situations righteously, right? And if at any point you deviate yourself from any of his commandments or his teachings or whatever he already has told us to do, then obviously that would be you not judging righteously according to those sort of situations. If you truly view Jesus Christ as a super wise individual who just, everything that he was saying was right on, on the mark and on the whatever, and just little principles like that, hopefully you're able to understand that I'm really saying these things according to how they actually are said. Instead of you just feeling, well, whatever, he's just saying these things, because typically individuals just look at Christ, right? And just like, well, this individual is like really intelligent and really wise, but they don't actually recognize, that he was saying this with the foreknowledge of, he knew everything that he was talking about. He knew this situation was going to come inside of your lives. And you know that they were going to come, especially when they were difficult for you to actually be able to obey his commandments. And that was the overall premise of it. Obviously he was saying the commandments that he gave to us and the teachings that he gave to us as the worst case scenarios, that were to come inside of your life. They were automatically obligated to obey for those sort of situations, not just the regular, normal types of situations that come inside of everyone's life, right? And obviously you're going to be able to benefit them much more if you have that level of foreknowledge before you actually go out and you actually reread the teachings of Christ with that level of understanding, right? And then you're just like, oh, okay, obviously he's telling us this because he already knows like the worst case scenario, and still, even in the worst case scenarios, he's already called us to actually obey what he has told us to do. And I mean, basically that's about it. But more or less, obviously the main point of the other video, the last video I just made, was just so you could actually fall in love with Christ's character and person, instead of you just doing these things in such a legalistic manner that I have to obey these kinds of teachings and doctrines because God is God. Obviously view it for this is who he actually was at his core, instead of you just viewing it like that. Obviously, because Christ is, he wasn't a hypocrite. He was, practicing what he preached. He was just basically trying to get individuals to know the Father's heart and to know his heart as well. The Father and him are one and the same, right? If they all have the same types of characteristics. By all, obviously, I mean the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Each three of them obviously have the same types of characteristics. They may function in a different manner because they're their own separate persons, but the overall premise of it all is that they're still God, right? That they still are omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent beings. But they all, they have their own characters, and that's just what sets them apart. In some way, shape, or form, you're actually able to tell which one is which, depending on the types of judgments that actually do come inside of your life, right? You'll be able to tell who's actually working inside of your life when you actually begin to gain that level of discernment. Maybe bearing fruit, and you'll be able to notice that that's Jesus Christ actually being and producing and able to actually mold you to form your eternal character. The Holy Ghost and the Spirit, and you actually wanted to obey God more. Obviously that would tend to gravitate towards the fruits of the Holy Ghost, and the fruits of Jesus Christ is bearing fruit, and the fruits of the Father is just holiness. And that's just something that you need to be able to understand. But that's just a little bit of knowledge. That's a little something to think about and to meditate on, like who is actually doing the most work inside of your life. And usually it tends to gravitate towards what you just typically have been doing all of your lives. I'm not sure these three individuals just like, it's like, okay, well, you could do whatever you want with this one, I'll do whatever I want with this one, the next one I'll do whatever, or whatever. They just work together at the same time for every single individual on the face of this earth. But for the most part, it's just something that I noticed in my life, is I would notice when a certain individual would actually begin working more inside of my life by the fruits that I obviously was producing. What type of fruits I was producing more of? Was I producing more fruits of, spirit, gentleness, and, lovingness, loving kindnesses? That automatically, I just know that that's the Father himself. When it has to deal with loving kindnesses, just because of the fact of, him being so nice and kind to me, in the same exact manner as how a father would actually act towards me. And he's more or less trying to teach me that that's how he is. And it's just like, okay, and this typically seems to be the fruit of his teachings, and that's what it actually bears. And I'm actually able to understand, come to a better knowledge of what their characters and persons actually are, just because of the fact that everybody just views the Father as like, wow, this individual is absolutely terrifying. And you're just like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I can't realistically think left or right without him actually thinking something else. And that's just, more overall a mentality when I actually do interact with this individual, because he's horrible. Who else? Jesus Christ, because he incarnated as a man, he's able to understand us, right? So there's some there's some sort of what's that word, some sort of comfort, right? Because both of you are on the same page. It's like he knows what it's like to be a man, because he incarnated in this lifetime. And so you're just like, okay, I know you understand this, you were tempted like us. And that's just the level of being able to have that confidence when you do talk to Jesus Christ based off that. But he's still the same individual as the Father. And the Holy Ghost is just someone who's very quiet and is just always listening. That's just something that I'm realistically noticing right now. And that just seems to be his overall character. It's just like, oh, he's always there because he's omnipresent and he's always listening. He doesn't say anything. It's just like, okay, don't grieve the Holy Ghost. He's always listening and la la la. And that's about it. But this video is just obviously meant to touch more in depth on the certain things that I realistically already know. Especially when it comes to the works of the flesh that people aren't actually able to discern, or works of the flesh. Yeah, spiritual warfare. Once you actually do begin engaging yourself in spiritual warfare, you're actually able to discern the tactics of the enemy. You're actually able to see right through his tactics and through certain, types of individuals that do come inside of your life as to why they're coming in your life. They're just trying to cause trouble. They're just trying to do this. Now, obviously, if you're barely getting into it, I don't advise you to take this sort of advice and counsel, but I'm definitely, telling you to test the waters with these sort of things in themselves, just because, you're going to be able to see there's some sort of patterns when you actually are engaging yourselves in spiritual warfare, the types of individuals that do come inside of your life, and the types of trials that, end up falling on your lap, and you're just like, okay, this is just what I have to do, this is what I have to take care of, and you just keep moving forward. And then sometimes the devil will come inside of your life as a Trojan horse, and they'll try to masquerade it and try to sugarcoat it as if that was the main thing, but the overall, Trojan horse of the whole concept of it, and why they actually did come inside of your life was to try to convince you that they're allowed to do those sort of things and to come inside of your life. At no point whatsoever are any of these devils or demonic entities allowed to come near you, around you, or to just, make themselves at home or comfortable to be near you. That is the overall Trojan horse. When these sort of tests end up happening and coming inside of your life, that you aren't actually able to discern that at that level yet, is just solely because of your lack of experience. And that's realistically it. But for the most part, these things are pretty easy. I'm just going to talk to you, just basically trying to get you to understand that this is just an overall mental issue that is just making this situation just seem almost impossible to actually be able to overcome. And I was just basically talking to this individual, right? And I was just telling them that everything that I was essentially doing and how I got to the point of being able to recognize that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's teachings. and how, how overcomplicated the situation is, right? And I was just like, well, I was just thinking of it like I thought being sinless was going to be this super feat that I was going to be able to notice and recognize. But when it actually did happen, when I did realize that my prayer was answered to be sinless, I realized how simple that it actually was. And if not for the influencers and and me being influenced by other outside forces, I probably would have, reached that level and reached that point sooner. But because of everything else that was actually happening inside of my life and how I just was overcomplicating these sort of situations, this is just why, these things ended up being the way that they were. And so I was just basically trying to get her to understand that these things are realistically that simple, and the simpler you make them and you keep them, the better off you're going to be. And obviously, I'm saying this with common sense, is to apply common sense and in context of everything else that Christ Himself had already warned us about. Obviously, that's not something that we need to be, or we could afford to dismiss, or to be so negligent towards. But definitely, for the most part, these things themselves are 100% easy. I mean, the next real step that you need to be thinking ahead towards is you actually being prudent. I mean, you know yourselves better than anybody else. You know what types of tests and trials that you consistently and always fall for. And that's just the overall, the main issues for you in your life. That's just what is going to destroy your relationship and intimacy with Christ. And I know you want to be able to hear His voice a lot more and a lot clearer, but these things themselves are going to put a strain on you and His relationship. And especially if you already have the desire inside of you to actually be able to be confident and bold and to know that there's nothing that Christ could actually bring up to your awareness that you're doing something wrong and other things like that. Obviously you're more at peace and you're more comfortable towards these sort of things, which is just the level that I'm trying to get you on. And so basically I was just telling her that it's like, man, honestly, it's just based on everything that you already know. It's realistically that simple. But when you aren't realistically able to define or know what sin really is, that's when you actually are going to define and you're going to come up with your own definitions for sin. Christ already told us to walk in the Spirit and not in the flesh, and these things are pretty simple to be able to understand once you actually take away all these sort of legalistic means of being able to interpret the scriptures and what they actually mean and what Christ actually meant. And so what is the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, self-control, temperance, patience, loving kindnesses, what's the other one? Long suffering and other things, basically just virtuous characteristic traits. And the opposites of these is the very exact opposite of them: impatience, rancor, division, jealousy, envy, strife, contentions, dissensions, and discord, and so many other different things that realistically is just everybody's able to recognize and discern. You don't go up to some random individual that you've never met before and just start acting petty with them and start doing other things like that. It's a sin. I mean, you may not recognize it or see it like that. You just know that it's bad. But in God's eyes, obviously, these things themselves have to deal with 100% sins. If an individual lets you live inside of their home and the next thing you do is just absolutely violate their home, you start breaking things, obviously that's a sin in itself, because you're not realistically living up to the or following the directions of the individual that's actually letting you live inside of their home, right? And that's something that you need to be able to discern and recognize. That's just how these things essentially work and are with Christ. It has nothing to deal with you actually being a super individual or whatever, this and that. It just all has to deal with a matter of principle. And the sooner you're actually able to recognize that these things are sins, whatever is bad is a sin, and whatever is good is praiseworthy, and other things like that, then the better off you're going to be. But sadly, many individuals don't seem to understand that, and they just think that they could do whatever they want, and they could do bad things, and somehow these bad things aren't actually viewed as sin. There's just a lot more. I mean, these things are a lot deeper than you actually think. There's a lot more than meets the eye when you actually recognize these sort of patterns and behaviors that you essentially begin doing. All of this has to do with the heart issue. There seems to be a lack of respect when you don't actually take care of an individual's home that obviously they're letting you live in, and that has to deal with you know, not loving your neighbor as yourself, and a whole bunch of other things, right? You think you can do whatever you want, highly estimation, pride, laziness, and just what is it? And a whole bunch of other things, sadly, that has to deal with, you know, the heart issue. And that in itself, if you didn't have any of those sort of heart issues, you wouldn't actually be committing those acts. And that's the main reason why these things themselves are actually sins. And so hopefully you're actually able to discern, you can read between the lines, right, as to why these things are essentially bad, and how bad they actually are. And I'm not just saying these things that, oh no, it really is a sin, and you can't just do these. You know, obviously I'm saying these things with confidence and boldness. I'm not saying these things with just, you know, whatever. I know what I'm talking about. And these things themselves are a lot more deeper than you actually think. And I mean, in other forms in my life, I was actually able to discern these sort of things, and these sort of actions and behaviors of mine were sins in themselves. I mean, with jobs and laziness, we basically already have common knowledge towards these things, that being lazy is just a sin. You're not supposed to do it. You don't know why it's a sin. And, you know, maybe I just don't feel like doing nothing today, and I don't feel like doing anything today. I don't feel like doing any of these sort of, I just feel like doing absolutely nothing, right? And you're just like, well, yeah, this, and that, and, but it's a sin to be lazy because of, you know, what it actually leads to. And just based off principles and premises like that, you're just able to understand that it's not good. And just overall, you know, obviously, it's just not good. You don't realistically need a solid reason to know why laziness is bad, but you just know that it isn't good, and that's essentially it. And so all of these actions and behaviors of yours need to be viewed in the same exact manner. Just because many individuals are just defining sins according to their own knowledge, and basically you don't know it all. You're not omniscient, and because you're not omniscient, you're not going to know every single sin and know what these things essentially are. You're going to continue defining these things and living how you want to live, and then Christ is going to be mad at you and impatient with you because you're frustrated in the grace of God, and you don't want to, you know, mature, grow up, and let go of some of these destructive habits, and you just want to continue doing whatever you want to do because you don't view it like how Christ sees it and how he's been wanting you to change. And so you put so many types of suffrage and so many sort of ailments inside of your life to be able to help you let go because it's hurting you that much. But what ends up happening, you know, you just don't put two and two together. You just think that you're just getting older or this or that, and then those little ailments and those things begin to actually remain and stay inside of your life without any foreknowledge as to why those things are essentially there. And realistically, it's because you're in sin, and it's that simple. But so yeah, I was obviously talking to her about that, and I was just trying to tell her and just teach her, you know, very simple, you know, principles to be able to live by, to be able to adopt for her lifestyle, for her mentalities and approaches as to, you know, you shouldn't be lazy, you shouldn't be this. It's like overall, you know, you're still a human being. You don't have to overcomplicate these things or be the superhuman being. Obviously, you know, you could learn perfectly from the angels to be able to know that these individuals just act how they want to act, right? They act like themselves, but they're holy angels. They don't ever sin. They don't ever do any of those sort of things. That's essentially what you need to get at. You know, your personality and your character and who you are at your core is you, right? But all these other types of actions and behaviors that you actually are acting out on a regular basis is just what needs to go, because Christ doesn't like it. If you automatically have sort of images and examples inside of your mind that are actually able to teach you, oh wow, this individual is such a good person, it's so good, it's like, man, this individual is perfect, and you know, they're human beings though. Obviously that's actually able to teach you how Christ actually is. You know, these individuals obviously have some sort of role model that was something similar to Christ, and so they automatically gravitated towards it. Or maybe they had some sort of other types of influences that they were just like, well, you know, I don't want to be those types of individuals or go on down that path or down that road, because I already seen people just slip and fall, and you know, they never got back up from it again. So that's just what I'm actually trying to help you understand. That way you're not just so, what's the word? ignorant, and you actually are able to live up to those sort of examples, just because there's human beings that actually live by those philosophies that we see on a regular basis, which is just something that you need to be able to discern that if they can do it, you can do it also. So why not start today, and why not start now? But yeah, so obviously I did touch on the demonic, and why the demonic in itself is going to be the main reasons why you're also going to overcomplicate these things. And it's realistically not that difficult to be able to understand that every single emotion, every single reaction and thought that you receive on your day-to-day lives is just not you, and that's just something that individuals are not really able to accept just yet, just because they're barely, throwing them straight into the deep end, and these individuals cannot swim whatsoever. But for the most part that I told you, is more important, right? And whatever you do with that information is essentially on you, but nevertheless, it's not a lie. And the more you actually are able to accept that, and the more you actually are able to really act those sort of ways of thinking out, the better off you're going to be. And I already know that it's just like you like to believe that some of these thoughts and all of these thoughts are your own because of your lack of experience with the spiritual warfare, and you're just like, well, this is just how I am, and I've been like this all of my life. And for me to realistically detach myself from my routine and how I essentially just live my life, it just seems to be way out there and not far-fetched, but it just seems to be something that I can't wrap my mind around it, and I just can't see how it's like that. It just is going to play an enormous role in their overall walk with Christ, and how they actually are going to be able to pass these sort of tests when the trials and tests and the fires do come inside of your life. And you're just going to be like, well, whatever, it was just me either way. If this individual or you don't bother actually really recognizing that the demonic does exist and you're just being tempted, you're going to always take responsibility for these temptations, and you're going to take accountability for them, even though you didn't actually fall into sin. And that's what's going to actually cause you to fall into sin. And just because you actually think as you, I may have said it plenty of times before in different forms and in different means, but that's the overall point of it all. That's why I don't want individuals to just completely dismiss the spiritual and to just think about obeying Christ and those sort of things themselves. It's just because of the fact when these temptations do come inside of your life, you're going to automatically take the bait and fall into sin because you think it's you, when in reality you need to stop, look at it for what it actually is. Think about Christ, how he was tempted in the wilderness, and then just automatically go right back to God and submit yourselves to the Lord and resist the devil. But many Christians don't even see it like that. Sadly, they're just like, well, whatever, everything. They don't want to actually admit it or confront that issue just because they're actually scared that somehow these devils are going to lay a finger on them. But obviously Christ is at the center of this, right? He's in control of all of it, and he's doing it for that specific purpose, to be able to refine your character and to finally get you to detach yourselves from your foolish ways of thinking. And that just seems to be the main issue of it all, is about the fact that many Christians don't even bother actually accepting that the demonic exists, and these things in themselves are very real principles that need to be living by, to be able to completely shun and ignore, and they just continue focusing on wisdom, wise sayings, and the teachings of Christ to avoid and to not walk in the flesh. But to them it's just like, well, whatever, once I get there, then I'll get there, and then that's going to be it. But in reality these things are not like that whatsoever. And I know these things themselves are just, it's just so much more freeing. You live more at peace once you actually are able to recognize and discern that none of these emotions or feelings or thoughts that you actually have on a regular basis are not even you. I mean, you're actually able to automatically shun and reject these sort of temptations and thoughts when they do come, them prior, right? Then you actually accepting this as truth. And that also seems to be, it's a sin. And just because you're not actually living in that way of thinking, you don't accept that it is a sin, that's why you're living the type of life that you're living. You're in bondage, you're heavily oppressed, and the devil's just do whatever they want with you, because you are essentially a complete and total sinner. because you actually have accepted that. So from a strategic standpoint, from the enemy and from the devil, how he's actually able to convince you that it doesn't actually exist, and therefore every single thing that you think and every single thing that you feel is you. You just, let the door wide open for anything and everything. The only real reason that would actually cause you to not fall into sin and temptations, and to not and to actually make you who you actually are and as yourself, and to have some sort of control, is the fact that you already know yourself and the types of habits and characteristics that you never would do, right? Like kissing another man, I'll just say it like that. That's something, if you're a male and you're a man, or fornicating and having sex before marriage. These things are pretty out of character for you, and that's just something that the devil knows, and he uses for future plans to be able to destroy you, right? Little by little, he gets you to compromise to be able to cause you to actually be able to accept those sort of philosophies and ways of life. That way, he's actually able to destroy your soul and cause you to degenerate. And that's just essentially how he does it. And it's just pretty sad because of the fact that individuals aren't actually able to discern that he does whatever he wants, because you let him do whatever he wants. And you don't actually draw the line. And because you don't draw the line, it just continues moving forward, and you just continue spiraling downward, and next thing you know, Christ loses your soul in the process because of just that little way of thinking. And I know it doesn't seem like it's that deep, but it really is. And maybe you actually have witnessed it in some way, shape, or form. It already has taken in your life for you to actually be able to discern that, little by little you begin compromising, and next thing you know, you have a hardened heart towards these sort of actions and acts that you just commit on a regular basis. Loving your enemies, or maybe you're actually noticing that you're not able to love your neighbor as yourself, and that's barely in its infancy before finally it gets you to just be rude and disrespectful towards other individuals. And that would just be obviously the overall end goal and end game for them. Well, for you, right? The devils, that's just what they actually have for you to get. Is just to try to rob you and try to steal anything and everything that is good. That way they actually, their plans have more of a likelihood of being able to succeed in your life and in your path. And that's just essentially it, sadly. But I mean, these things are not to be overcomplicated, and more or less they're not even overcomplicated. It's not that difficult to be able to understand. These things are just like, okay, common sense. And yeah, and I'm obviously going to talk about another scripture and another doctrine that is just so it's such a slick type of doctrine that is actually able to take many souls into the lake of fire. And this just ties back to the same type of premise that I was talking about earlier, and the temptations and not being able to, take responsibility for these things, or the devils will just convince you and try to make you think that every single thought that you actually have is yours, when in reality they're just trying to manipulate you. Is not to listen to your heart, right? And that the heart is deceitful of all things. They're obviously trying to rob you from any sort of virtue and treasures of your heart that you already have, because you're not willing to obey and recognize the fact that there are some good treasures inside of your heart. Not everything about you is actually bad. And so they obviously try to get you to be centered and focused on the bad of your heart. And because of that, you aren't actually supposed to be able to listen to anything that comes out of your heart. But in reality, from the long run, the overall premise of it all, of Christianity, is to be able to have these sort of characteristics and commandments be integrated inside of your heart. That way, you're actually able to say, it doesn't sound like something I would do. And therefore, all of these sins and all the works of the flesh, division, rancor, jealousy, is just something that you just shrug off and dismiss immediately, because it's not a part of who you actually are. You've never been like that. I'm just not like that. For me to actually, obviously that's the more slick manner that the devil just says it and twists it to be able to advance that sort of agenda, to be able to program you. That way you don't actually say those sort of things when it comes down to you recognizing that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's teachings. And basically, once I actually have that level of experience, for me to be able to tell you it, you just have to apply common sense. It's just realistically not that deep. Some of these characteristics, it really is a heart transformation, just like how Christ actually said. Then the better off you're going to be, and the more fruit you're going to be able to reap and have. and bear for your lives. But if you just continue, not taking the blame, but you just continue, just living in fear, which is just what it is, right? Fear mongering. You don't actually accept these sort of messages in themselves and to apply common sense, to apply common sense for your lives. But when it actually comes down to Christ's commandments and those sort of teachings and principles in themselves, and sadly, you're just gonna spiral out of control, just because of the fact that they're just going to convince you not to ever listen to your heart, and that you don't actually begin storing treasures for yourselves in heaven through your obedience and wanting to obey God more. So grace and peace be multiplied to you. The grace to know what I'm saying, the peace to know that it's sent from God, and the mercies to be able to receive these graces, and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts and be with you all. So, yeah, while I was actually just mentioning that, also it's just the deliverance side of it all, is you actually being able to ensure that you are able to deliver yourself and to break all these curses up that will cause you to be hindered, or to be stagnant, or to just not be able to excel as quickly and as as fast as you know that you can. That's just what the main purpose of it all is just to be able to absolutely steal your joy out of your life. But you could get rid of it, Obviously, I was mentioning that in the last video, how you should just personify these sort of things. That way, you're actually able to put a face to these sort of reasons as to why, all of these sort of problems, as to why you have, the issues in your life, and you're just like, okay, I just recognize it, and I see the face, and I put the face on it, and this is the main reason why my life is the way that it is, and I'm a sucker for all the lies, and I just continue falling for the lies, and that's essentially it. And it realistically is that simple, And so, obviously, I want you to put that to practice right now, especially for something that automatically the Holy Ghost just reminds you of. And just like, oh yeah, or something you've just been struggling with. You would just personify your struggles. You're actually able to discern that this is the being and the entity that is causing you to fall for the temptations. They're appealing to your logic because that's what they actually appeal to, and your reasonings you always take to bait because it just makes sense to you. And so these things themselves are 100% destructive. How you actually think and how you just carry yourselves, and what you accept and what you think is all right is just going to be the main reasons why you have so many issues. And that just seems to be the main issue with a lot of individuals, as well as that's how they, in short, actually begin working inside of your life. They try to get you to accept that it's just the way it is, and it's just normal. And initially, they'll throw some unclean spirit on you, and that's not even the main reason why it's actually putting on you. That's not even the main reason why they're putting those sort of things on you. The main reason to put that on you is to finally, begin that work in your life, to finally get it to stay. And then obviously they completely rob you of your image, and your image is all old, decrepit, and other things like that, right? And so it has nothing to deal with spiritual warfare, or any of those things. You have to think ahead, right? You have to think and be like, well, how can the devil use this, and what are the plans of the enemy for putting this in my life? And obviously it's to be able to rob you of your youth and your vigor and your stamina and other things like that, to be able to distort and just destroy your soul entirely. You weren't actually able to recognize it or discern it. If you could think of a time when you were so much more cleaner, or you felt cleaner and clean to the point that you actually are now, obviously you were able to understand that they actually have been working in your life to be able to rob you of that cleanliness, and that cleanliness, to be able to get you to finally be able to accept more of these devils and more of their friends, until you begin looking like an old, decrepit, nasty human, and all of it has to do with just unclean spirits that try to reside and make your vessel their home. And to you, you're just like, well, whatever, it's just how I am. I get old, and whatever lies that they try to convince you to be able to pacify you and not fight, and whatever will work is just what they're going to put in your life. I mean, you may not recognize it just yet, just because of certain things like that, but they already have been putting so many more types of works like that, especially if you used to be like a cute kid, right? Or something like that, and now it got to the point where you're going bald and other things like that. The main issue was not to actually get you to go bald. The main issue, or the main means to be able to get you to go bald, is to get you to actually admit defeat and to not bother fighting and to just lay down and take it. That is the reason why every single one of these sort of demonic temptations even comes out of your life, is to get you to lie down and just take it. And that's essentially it, and so because of that, you have every means and capability to be able to prevent these sort of things from actually occurring and happening inside of your life for the future, right? Future reference. That way, you're not so gullible, susceptible to letting any of these nasty, vile things remain and stay inside of your life, to linger or to even begin, right? And to just think ahead and to ensure that it completely does stop. And that way, individuals aren't actually so discouraged when they don't have as much strength as they did when it happened and it began happening, and obviously that's just the overall plan, and that's their strategy, and that's their strategic standpoint for your life. They're trying to take anything and everything away from you because they know that they can, and you're not going to do a single thing about it because you're scared of engaging yourself in spiritual warfare against the enemy and whatever they actually can do and whatever they will do. So how are you actually able to combat this? How are you actually able to free yourselves? Just break the curses and deliver yourselves. It's just a mental issue and a mindset thing. If you could actually think before these sort of ailments and infirmities did begin inside of your life, and all of a sudden you feel relief and you feel just like how you did when when you did live like that, then you're actually able to recognize and discern that it was just a mental issue to begin with, and it was nothing to worry about or nothing for you to actually be thinking that you're not worthy of being healed because you've done so many things or too much time has passed. Obviously, that's a flat out lie, because as soon as you actually act like how you did when these things didn't affect you whatsoever, automatically it left. That should tell you everything that you need to know about it. And then anything else, when it tries to convince you, even though it just left, that it's not going to work or it won't work, it's just a flat out lie, right? Because now you actually have that level of experience and discernment to know that it is a lie, instead of you just taking and accepting anything that you hear. But yeah, I mean, these things are realistically that simple. I know they don't seem that simple just because you're barely putting them to practice, and so other things like that, but once you actually begin putting these things to practice, and it just forms itself into a healthy habit, you're able to apply it to different forms and different types of things. And then you just continue refining yourselves and cleaning yourselves up from these unnecessary suffrages and avoidable demonic entities and presences in your vessel and in your lives. The types of spirits that just try to remain and make your temple their home. Obviously, they're actually able to finally be removed out of your lives, and this is going to be the main reason why you're not able to keep a job or hold a job. And it's just as simple as that, right? They were just trying to remain in your life under those sort of premises and under that guise, to be able to convince you that they should be there. And finally they're removed, and you look that much more freer and cleaner, and next thing you know, you start getting hired right to jobs that you never thought you would actually get, and that's pretty good, but sadly these things, they do take time, right? But the more you actually believe my words, because of the level of experience I actually do have, the better off you're going to be sooner, and you're not going to waste as much time than you think. Obviously, you have a lot of opportunities because it's not the end yet, and Christ hasn't returned. But for the most part, you definitely need to act as if these things are actually difficult and hard. That way, you're able to teach yourselves for when the situations do become difficult and hard, and you're not, able to just be so overwhelmed or overthink these sort of things that do come inside of your life when they actually begin to be too difficult, and you're just like, well, what do I do? So practice makes perfect, right? And you obviously your behavior yourselves very wisely, and concerning these sort of things that actually do come inside of your life, you're not so gullible and naive, right, to wait until these sort of situations do come and do arise in your life, for you to be able to discern that what these sort of tests are going to be here. They've been here. That's going to be too hard, and I don't have enough strength to get rid of them, and that's just good. So casting these things out by the legion out of your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions. That way you're actually able to be more freer and at peace, and that way you're actually able to work efficiently and more efficient for yourselves and for other individuals, especially because you have every means and you're not ignorant anymore. So now you actually have the ability to be able to protect the innocent and the weak, because you've been there, right? And it hits home because you're just like, wow, I've been there before. I wish I could help you out, and I wish I could have helped myself out, but I was just so stubborn, blah blah blah. But you could obviously you could do these things in a slick manner, and in a manner that is going to be able to help them by relying on the Holy Spirit's wisdom. And obviously that's how you begin working for every single individual on the face of this earth and for their lives. And you're not just so loveless, and you lack that compassion for your neighbors, for your enemies and other types of individuals like that. And then you're obviously able to produce a lot more character and fruit for Christ, that the Father is glorified, and more individuals begin to copy your virtues and wisdom and wise sayings. And then obviously it just begins to benefit more individuals, because, and I mean, hopefully you're able to see the bigger picture, right? That these things are really that simple and really that easy. But you're just sadly going to have to put these things to practice and begin practicing right away. That way you could actually begin to free the captives sooner. And you don't bother looking back. It's just like, wow, I wasted so much time. And you just continue moving forward, and put the plow down to work. And yeah, and other things like that. But these things are realistically so simple once you actually do even help another individual out. Sadly, you just overcomplicate these things because it's you. And it's just demonic. They're trying to get you to overthink. But for other individuals, for sure, obviously, it feels that much more satisfying when you actually are able to deliver an individual from the bonds of the enemy and the devil. How they're actually able to manipulate and just torment them and remain inside of their life to be able to do all sort of vile and wicked things. And not anymore, right? Just because you actually are able to free them. But these things are just realistically that simple. But now you're actually going to have to begin practicing on the types of individuals that obviously you don't want to help. That way it actually is able to produce more character and more growth, and you mature a lot rapidly and a lot sooner, a lot quicker than you would if you were just doing individuals that you actually like. It has more merit to it in Christ's eyes. And he actually is able to see that you do want to change, and you have a willingness to change, instead of just doing the the bare minimum as a Christian. And other principles like that, and individuals just don't actually bother equating or recognizing that Christ is able to see see it for what it actually is. And obviously these things are at face value to Christ. He gets discouraged, or not discouraged, he gets disappointed at your actions and how foolish you actually are. But it is what it is. You have a means to be able to repent ahead of time, and to repent right now. That way these things never happen again. So take the opportunities and think ahead as to certain times of instances where you're not going to actually learn the easy way, and you're going to learn the hard way. And that's going to be able to teach you, to help you to understand how Christ essentially works, and how he actually is, how he's been working inside of your life, and how he's been working in other individuals' life. And hopefully you're actually able to be a lot more happier for these people, because that they are on the right path, and that Christ genuinely does love them. And the same exact manner is how he loves you as well. And because he loves them, it's actually able to teach you that whatever sort of virtues or characteristics that Christ is molding and getting out of this individual, he could get the same type of reaction from you as well, if you just have that level of faith in him and what he actually has been doing and is doing in your life. That's another issue and problem for many Christians, is just that they lack faith for when these situations do come inside of their life, and they begin automatically blaming Christ for all their problems. But these individuals are going straight to hell for that abomination. And they just continue doing so many other different types of things that cause them to be jealous and envious of another individual's progress, and how fast they actually are able to advance with biblical teachings, and just things like that. And I already understand how the human, the psyche or mind works, for them to be able to just want to see these sort of results, and because they don't know how to be able to function, because they've never, these sort of situations have never happened in their life, and therefore they have no means for them to actually be able to think back and wonder how they actually cope with the sort of situations that were similar to that one. Is just so sad, right? They just revert to old and primal sort of behaviors and actions, and they just continue, acting like little toddlers, and that's just what actually ends up happening. And for you, it's just like, well, yeah, it did happen, but you didn't realistically have that level of knowledge to be able to understand why it happened like that, and that was just the main reason why your overall crush that you were using and so dependent on and for was something that you've been using since you were a child, and you were throwing a temper tantrum back when you actually would scream at the top of your lungs because you wanted to eat ice cream for breakfast, or you wanted your mom to buy you a toy. And some way, shape, or form, this thing actually took and it remained to stay inside of your life, and it was causing so much more damage as a Christian, and that you wanted, and the Christian that you actually wanted to be, because of your mental attitudes and states of mind and approaches. You were getting so heavily rebuked for all of these things, and you didn't view it as sins, or supposedly that Christ wasn't actually going to force you to pay for your iniquities and for your sins, but realistically that's not what happened. You're paying for them right now, through rebukes, through saggy skin, through getting fat, through through doing so many other types of actions and works like that. I was able to teach you that pain sucks, and so I better knock it off, and I better get right with Christ right away, or something bad is going to happen, and something worse is going to happen to me. And so there's no realistically any point in you continuing to just defining sins, because of how much trouble you actually are in for thinking like that, because you're in a lot of trouble. I just want to get that out, that way you're actually able to know for certain how much trouble you're in, how bad that really is. So I'm gonna ask Holy Ghost what else he wants to say. He says, yeah, you're gonna have to fight for others, for yourselves, and to ensure that you actually are not falling for the very easy and see-through tactics of the enemy that he throws inside of your life. And these things are not easy or see-through just because you don't have that level of experience. But once you begin fighting a little bit, it's going to be able to cause some of these sort of legalistic means and ways of thinking that you've just been relying and so attached to, you're actually able to finally let it go and really live at peace, to the point where you actually are not going to be faced by these things ever again, which would be the overall point of it all, which I'm desirous of, that you never return to any of these sins that you consistently and always fall for on a regular basis, because you're actually able to think ahead and to be able to know for certain that, in this area of my life, I'm extremely gullible, and because of that, I have every means to be able to even, to better your weak points, and to be able to benefit from these things. I know your weak points, they do teach you humbleness, because you're not really at that level just yet for you to actually be able to acknowledge that these things you're not falling for anymore. But still, all of these weak points are going to cause you to go into the lake of fire, because they're sins. God does not protect anything that is not his. Because these works are sins, this is why, obviously you're in so much suffrages and torments. This is why these sort of ailments come inside of your life, and they remain and stay, and why they even come inside of your life to begin with. And it realistically is that deep, right? But because you don't recognize or realize it, that it is like that, and because of your actions and your ways of thinking, that you actually are suffering for that, and that much, you just continue acting and living these sort of principles out without any real knowledge or any real understanding, right? And you just continue, throwing these things in the bus, and oh, that's not what I was trying to say. You continue, obviously, putting the dirt under the rug, and yeah, but obviously you're gonna end up dying for that way of thinking. It's plain and simple. The Holy Ghost, Jesus Christ, obviously wants you all to continue fighting for your eternal characters, because he's obviously putting these sort of trials and temptations and fires in your life for that specific purpose, to be able to cause you to ask the question, what's the point of it all? And Are you gonna continue being faithful, or are you just gonna go your own way and to not bother being as faithful to Christ as He was to you? And sadly, individuals just continue going left, and uh, they don't even bother choosing Christ, even though all of their lives they were just, sing worship songs and other things like that. And it realistically really is that sad, to be able to see how gullible these sort of individuals were, to be able to admit uh, that they were like that at one point, and then to finally just completely dismiss that and act like these individuals are children of rebellion and children of hell. And obviously Christ cries about it because He already knows what's inside of their hearts, and because of the lack of real leadership and direction, these sort of situations ended up happening, and they ended up departing from the faith, and they realistically didn't have anyone to really teach them and guide them as to what is wrong and what is good, and to just keep it simple, right? And it's just the sad part about it. So yeah, I'm gonna be losing more, graces in by the legion in your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions. That way you actually are able to free yourselves and be a lot more at peace with these sort of, sayings of mine, and, for you actually, to be able to be bold, concerning what I actually have mentioned. But, obviously if you're not bold, what is it going to lead to? It's going to lead to doubt, and doubt is a sin. So please think ahead, and please don't think that you know it all. You got it like that, because that is not the case whatsoever. Another thing also is for you to be able to confess that these things are easy. Obviously it's like a mind hack, and I don't want to use this mind hack because of that, and I don't want to shoot thinking that there's shortcuts like that. But because you actually have confessed it, it's going to, really start the gears, and for you to continue moving forward, because you're going to hold yourself accountable to that confession, and that's going to actually cause you to really do that work, and to get you to finally be committed to those sort of ways of thinking and actions for your life, and for yourselves. But so yeah, just do it. It's pretty good, it's pretty funny. That's how your mind actually works, and that's how every mind essentially works. But it is what it is. And I hope you actually are able to benefit that much more from it than I benefited from it, because I benefited a lot, and I was so much more at peace. I loved life. I loved it because I wasn't falling into sin, and I was able to know that Christ loves me a lot more because of my commitment, and I wasn't just rambling on and saying whatever I wanted to say, or whatever, and praying whatever I wanted to pray, but I realistically actually did, back it up with the works, and reading scriptures, and other things like that, for me to know and discern that I shouldn't deviate myself from this path, or from these sort of desires that God actually has placed inside of my heart. Because He already knows, and it's just my work that I'm supposed to be doing. He does that with everyone, so yeah, it's pretty common knowledge and pretty understandable, right? As to why sort of tests actually do come inside of your life that you weren't actually able to discern what was the main reason for it all. And that was essentially it, that many individuals didn't recognize or discern. It's just because of that. To be able to perfect your eternal character, to be able to accept these tests and fires with joy, and cheerfully, instead of you being like, ah, man, here we go again. But because you already know that it's going to benefit you, that is why you take these sort of tests joyfully and cheerfully. And yeah, how much more excited can you be? How much more exciting is that? Not very much. Just continue, really, perfecting your eternal character, and Christ is actually able to see that you are sincere about it, instead of you just saying whatever you want to say in the heat of the moment. And obviously Christ is able to recognize and discern that you have some sort of commitment and some sort of faithfulness to this, which is good. There's no need for you to actually, revert back to these sort of foolish ways of thinking that these pastors continually just preach and pump out, when you actually are able to know that there's a more excellent way, and that there's a lot, other means and different means for you to be able to please Christ. I'm not saying what they actually say is wrong, or what they preach is wrong. All I'm saying is that it's just common sense. I need air to breathe, format types of sermons, and many individuals are not realistically able to discern it because they've never heard any of these sort of messages that I've been preaching on my channel. And because they've never heard of it, how are they going to know what is really good and what their soul really needs? and they're just going to continue, forcing themselves to be content with the sort of dead and boring types of sermons that realistically just keeps referring and talking to uh, the same old, I'm talking about the same old. It's sad. They don't realistically give any real direction to the sheep, but they're able to tell you why we're saved by grace through faith, and not even that are they realistically really able to do, because they tell you not to obey the law of Moses. And it's just so sad that many individuals, because they don't actually read the Bible and the scriptures, that's why they even get deceived, and they continue mocking and scoffing at the real prophets of God and servants of the Lord. And all of them end up receiving their wages for their sins and rebellion. Even though they clearly knew right from wrong, they automatically chose the legalistic wrong. And to be able to torment and torture and harass individuals that were clearly sent from God, to be able to help them and aid them. And because Christ automatically knows that their intents were 100% good, it just makes it that much worse, in all honesty. And it's so sad, because of that, and because of that fact itself, that, Christ knows that they actually have good hearts, and because he knows they have good hearts, that's why they're actually saying those sort of messages. People just don't want to hear it. They much rather prefer to live in denial than actually accept the guilt that comes from falsely accusing another individual. And you could think of certain situations in your life when you actually have done that to another individual, but what's it going to be? What do more individuals typically lean towards and on? Just denial. They don't actually want to confront or admit that they were actually that wrong, for them to be able to repent with works meet for repentance. Yeah, my bad, kind of stuttered a little bit. Sometimes I wanted to spit and sometimes I didn't, but whatever. So yeah, I'm still helping you out. I'm still casting these things out by the Legion, loosing more spirits inside of your vessel, that way you're actually able to really be freed, sanctified, holier, a lot more joyous and joyful than you were previously, because you're not feeling so weighed down by your ways of thinking and your lack of obedience to the law of Moses. And yeah, I mean, I don't even know what else to say, to be honest. It realistically is that simple. And like I was mentioning to her, that you don't realistically have to worry or focus about you actually falling into sin, because it's going to make you panic. All you realistically have to do is just focus on wisdom and wise sayings, and that in itself is going to really preserve you and cause you not to fall or stumble into temptation and to cause you to sin, which is just what the devils are essentially trying to do. They're trying to convince you that the way that you actually think is you, and that you're so much more in trouble for it now. But these things are so easy and simple for you to be able to discern, and for you to actually practice out for your lives. And then finally you are able to stop your old foolish ways of thinking, and then you actually are able to regenerate to the image of the Father, because his is absolutely perfect. You're not bound by your mistakes or by your old self and how you essentially have been acting in this lifetime, but now you actually are moving forward and thinking ahead to what actually awaits you and the type of results that you actually are going to see eventually, and how close you're actually going to become to Christ-like image, to a Christ-like image, instead of the old just nonsense, scriptures, and just aimlessly reading the scriptures without any real knowledge or direction as to why you were supposed to or called to do any of the things that you actually have been told to do already. And yeah, I mean, it's just sad, really. So I'm still losing more graces and virtues and breaking these curses up. That way you actually are finally able to remove all these nasty sins in your vessel and in your heart. And that way all these little Trojan horses are finally able to be removed, and you're freed from their clutches and their grasp. Because there was a lot of Trojan horses that they essentially were gifting you on a regular basis, and you never even bothered recognizing or realizing what was actually happening in your life. And that's just essentially it. But definitely focus on the Trojan horses to finally be able to get rid of all those nasty things. You definitely will feel the relief and how much more freer you actually are, because they were definitely weighing down on you, and they were weighing you down. They were holding you back from a lot of things that you realistically realistically were your strengths. And the devil, knowing these sort of principles, he does it on purpose to be able to never cause you to actually be able to be a threat to his kingdom. So yeah, breaking these curses up, loosing them by the legion. Pray to Christ for more help and ask him for a more excellent way. That way you actually are able to benefit from all of these messages. Okay, love you. Bye. More graces.